So you had a question about economies of scale. That's a very good question. Economies of scale is a very important concept. It's very general. It applies to all kinds of production processes, not to everything, to some things more than others, but most production processes will have some form of economies of scale. And what it means is that when you do something on a large scale, you can usually do it more efficiently. You can probably think of a lot of examples of this. You could probably think of a lot of reasons that it would be the case. Just as one example, let's think if you're making an apple pie. If you're just making one, you've never done it before, how would you go about it? Well, probably first you look up a recipe online, read through the recipe, you compile an ingredient list. You look through your kitchen, see what you already have. You go to the store to buy the rest. Then you come home, you cut up the apples, you make the crust, eventually you put it in the oven, and all the time you're following the recipe and trying to do each step just as they say in the recipe, but you might not understand it all that well. You're probably going to make some mistakes. And then you heat up your whole big oven just to bake one little pie. You get a pie, probably it's not going to be the best pie ever made, and it took you quite a bit of effort to make it. So it's not a very efficient process. Now suppose you're making two. Well, you only have to read the recipe once or twice, the same number as before. You don't have to read it twice as many times. You only need to heat the oven once, so you have some cost savings there because you're heating the oven once for two pies instead of once for one pie. You take one trip to the store, you make one search through your kitchen for ingredients. So, and maybe if you make a mistake on one pie, you don't make the same mistake on the other because you recognize your mistake. So you're probably going to make better pies on average, and they'll be at a lower cost. Now suppose you're making 50 pies. Well, now you get really good at it, so you're probably not going to make any mistakes. You can keep the oven hot. You put 4 or 5 pies in at a time. You might invite your friends over or hire somebody to help you, and maybe you specialize. One of you cuts all the apples, one of you makes the crust, and you get really good at the one job that you're doing over and over again. You might also buy specialized equipment. There's such a thing as an apple peeler, which you can buy, and then you just turn a crank and it takes the core out and peels the apple. It's very efficient. So now that's probably not worth buying if you're just going to make one pie. But if you're going to make 50, that's probably worth buying. So you buy the specialized equipment, you buy it once, you keep using it over and over again, and that reduces your cost. Now, if you go into the store, and let's suppose you're walking around the aisles, you look at the prices, and then you think, A, could I make that myself? And B, how much would it cost me to do it in terms of both what I'd spend on supplies and equipment and the value of my time that I would spend? You could probably figure out that in almost all cases, the good is much cheaper in the store than what it would cost you to make it. Which raises an interesting question. Well, how does the store do it? How do they get those goods on the shelf so cheaply? And part of the answer is that many of those goods are made in factories. And factories are all about economies of scale. Factories make lots and lots of something, and as a result, they can make it a lot more cheaply than you could do it on your own. One way they do this is that they hire a lot of workers, and the workers split up the task, and they have really narrow specialized tasks. The worker may not have that high a level of skill in general, but if they just have one task in a larger process, that task may be really simple. So the good as a whole is very complicated, but each worker has a simple task. They might be able to be trained to do it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Initially, they'll make mistakes and they'll be a little slow, but as they keep doing it over and over again, they get really good at it. And so this gives a lot of economies of scale. They'll also invest in a lot of machinery and equipment. And if you think about Henry Ford's factory, you know, he's famous for raising productivity in the car industry so much and making cars affordable to the ordinary common man. How did he do it? He made an assembly line, which involved a lot of capital investment. You have to get all this equipment, and then the workers had really narrow jobs. So that's basically the concept of economies of scale, and it applies to all sorts of production processes, and it's a really important part of how the economy works. Any questions?